episode 1 has been produced. You put it up on YouTube, or it's ready to go?
It's in the wild.
Anyone could find that.
I think 3 people have.
That's not bad. And what did you think of episode 1? I listened to it last night while I was walking the dog.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? When you watch really high quality produced, experienced podcasters or people that post on YouTube, they make it look effortless and easy, and they make the conversation, flow. They know when to come in, they know timing. And I thought what I found was that I was just so eager to jump into the conversation. And I felt I was just trying to, I was just a little bit on edge. Sounded a bit on edge anyway, but I might just be being, a bit hard on myself. But I thought the concept was all right. I think we're going to find our way. I think this is about ideas, isn't it? This podcast is about us discussing ideas that we see, and I think that's interesting content. And I think as we evolve it, we'll become. I don't think it's about becoming polished. I think it's about becoming our own kind of way of doing things, our own style. I think that's cool.
I think the hardest thing is to just be natural, but not to let the conversation just run away. So you're holding those 2 thoughts at the same time. And I think it just comes from doing it a lot. I've done now, this is number 4 of ours? 4 or 5. I've done 3 or 4 for the new Kalium one as well. So I'm getting up to 10, and I'm starting to feel a little bit like I'm finding my voice. And a lot of it, I think, and we've both been teachers, and for me, if a lesson's going to be good before you've walked in the door, because if you've kind of planned it properly, which was for me less often than knowing it was going to be a shit show. And I think it's the same for these podcasts. Like, if you've done the prep and you're excited about the episode, I think that's going to come across. Like, I interviewed someone for Kalium that had written a book, and I was interested in content. Like, if you're creating content that isn't businessy content, like, how does that help you when you're creating commercial content? And I read 14,000 words of this person's book, and it was really genuinely good. So I was just, once I'd read it, I spent an hour, 2 hours reading it, and I was to jump on the call, and I just had all of these questions that I really wanted to know about the book and how she thought of it and how that's kind of helped her. And I think there's no substitute for like actually being excited. And today, you hit me last night with a pretty heavy brief, but it was good. It made me think about it, and it's actually a good thing to do out of business hours, just to think about these things. And I've got what I think is some good ideas. Based on what you said. So let's get into it.
All right. Well, let's give a bit of framing then. So obviously we wanted to build a podcast, or a way to create discourse around ideas, because as founders, entrepreneurs, we have a passion for new things and get excited by potentially kind of rolling out ideas. I know that I certainly do. So I happened to be stumbling across an absolute mogul. I don't know how I came across it. I was something about an anniversary or something. But it was to do with Bloomberg. So Michael Bloomberg. I was like, do you know what? I know about his channel. I don't know about his little computer. Little, I should say. And I thought, I'm going to do a little bit of digging. I didn't have to do much to find out what this chat was about. So straight onto YouTube, watched some young lad who's about 17 from somewhere in Japan, just basically spending 10 minutes telling me about what made Bloomberg great. So ultimately, he's an interesting fella. So very, very bright academic, came through Harvard, joined the banking sector in the 70s. Banking back then was incredibly manual. The computer was in its infancy. And, he was in banking, did really well, rose to partner by a decade. At 30, he was already a partner at a big law firm. And then 81 hit, and he got laid off. He did get $10 million, I must admit, which is not a bad charm in 1980 or 1981. And then he basically took a break, and he started to think about what he wanted to do next. And clearly a creative guy, he looked at what he knew about. And he looked at the financial sector and was just like, you know what? There is just a load of slow process shit in every single day of every single banker's life that's doing this trading. So it's in trading space within inside of banking. And he thought there's got to be a better way to do that. So he looked at the mundane tasks. So he genuinely challenged what the industry was like, or what his job was like, or what junior people inside the financial sector were doing in the trade on the trading floor. And this lad put up pictures of like guys pushing paper. I was like, surely that can't be the process. So in the 80s, it was all pencil and paper. That's how they used to pass instruction around. That's how they used to receive stock prices, and they used to get the readouts, and they used to act on that. So you can imagine that the speed of information consumption was just shit and slow, and therefore your decision making is shit and slow, and your ability to capitalise on opportunities is slow. So he recognised that, and he was like, right, we've got to automate this. So he basically designed a very simple computer interface on a specific piece of hardware with a specific keyboard. So it wasn't like, your regular QWERTY keyboard. It had shortcuts. Like if you wanted to go and get stocks, you want to go and get currency, you wanted to go and get, whatever else they were trading. So it had some unique proprietary features to it. And he took it to Merrill Lynch. He pitched him, and they were like, well, we're not really sure. I think we could probably build this in-house, the usual thing. And so they took it. Merrill said, right, what we're going to do, we'll take it to our team. And if they can replicate this, it's a no. And they said, it's going to take 6 months. And he was just like, 6 months before we can start. And he said, okay, I'll deliver this to you in 5. Which I just love that. Just bold, straight out of the box. This is just an architecture at the moment. So he goes and builds it, and he delivers it. And then, the rest is history. He's got 325,000 terminals now in various evolutions, because now it's just an amazing big, kind of dual monitor thing. 325.
Do you know what these terminals do? Like, I don't really. What is it? It's just information about share prices.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, what they do. It's a data feed to give people the insight and data to be able to make decisions and trades. So he's pushed people from your piece of paper to bang, I've got info, bang, I can go. And the computers will be trained to do auto trading, obviously, and things like that. That was years back, it was the 80s. So if something hits a certain point, it will execute the trade. So all of that information comes from a Bloomberg terminal, and he owns the market. So 325,000 terminals at $24,000 a year, each. So I think the lad said it was about 9 billion, or 6.5 to 8 billion, something like that. I haven't done the maths. So there he is. So there's a guy who's looked at an industry, and this is where I'm getting to, and this is what I think we should talk about. He's gone into an industry industry clearly loves, and he's looked at how he could, I hate the word, but disrupt it with the use of data and information. So my challenge to you, whilst I was sitting in the David Lloyd car park waiting for Lindsay to finish yoga, she told me the wrong time. I was there for an hour. Enjoyed that. It was pretty chilly. Is what other industries could we discuss, or what other opportunities could we discuss that we haven't thought about that could be shaken up by information, could be shaken up by data that is yet to kind of be involved in the decision making and the thinking. And that was my brief to you. I wanted you to come with 2 ideas, and I think it's a really interesting discussion point to think about what's left in the landscape for data disruption, because it's happened across many industries, as we know. We threw a few at each other last night, but yeah, I'd like to know what you've come with, Doug.
Yeah, I have got some ideas, but just on this Bloomberg, presumably, like, what's the value prop now of these terminals? Presumably, the technology is replicable. Presumably, all the data's there, and that you could backwards engineer how they get the data. Is there anything proprietary? Do we think, or do we think it's just that they have the brand and people use it because they've always?
Well, one, I would imagine there's long-term contracts. 2, I think it's completely institutionalized and has been there since the 80s. I would imagine that they would only change for money because all the data is, the data.
But you think if you and I rocked up with the Mohara terminal, we're like, guys, this is like 4 times cheaper, it's exactly the same, the banks would probably say, like, if they're wrong, if anything goes wrong here, that's going to cost us a lot of money. So even though you probably could create the product, it's just the fear of changing away from that big brand.
I would think so, and I would imagine there's proprietary feeds that Bloomberg secures as well, because the data is the key, right? The terminal is just the vehicle, that and an efficient vehicle, but the data, I would imagine he's got that absolutely sewn up.
Yeah, they maybe even get their own data.
I would imagine they probably aggregate and produce their own some form of data out of algorithms. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
So, okay. Ideas.
What a great business, eh? What an unbelievable business. It just ticks. And now he's got a media company and everything else like that. But that little ticker across the bottom of Bloomberg, I've seen it for years, but I've never bothered looking at him. And it's fascinating. Done so well.
I like, getting like data that's all over the place, packaging it, and then selling it to people through software is, I think, actually, or just selling it to people is clearly a great business. I've actually got 4 things. I've got 2 businesses that do this that I know of that do it well, and then I've got 2 new ideas.
Okay, right. We better get moving then.
2 businesses that already do this well. So one is a company in the UK called Red Flag Alert, and they just take all of this company data, and they just, one of the things that's incredibly valuable is they just get all of this company data from Companies House, all of this kind of government data on businesses, and they just work out, is this business going to fail in the next 12 months? So if you've got a load of customers, like businesses get stung for billions of pounds every year on unpaid invoices. And what their software does is it just says, shove all your customers in here and we'll let you know if they're about to go bust so you can do something about it. And all that information is kind of out there, but they package it, they put it through an algorithm to kind of make an assessment as to whether the business is going to go bust. And then so if you're like a construction company and these guys get stung all the time, they can just shove all of their customers in there. Like what was that big construction company that went bust? Can't remember. Anyway, that they went bust and they left behind like all these suppliers. It's just like a domino effect. All these suppliers just went to dust because they were their main contractor. So love that business. And also it's a great one for selling. You're just selling on fear. It's like, if you don't get this, you just got no idea. So that's a great product, and does that well. And then the second one is in the US. It's called Property Radar. I don't know this one as well, but essentially it's data on properties. So, real estate, there's a few different use cases. One of them is like real estate investors can just basically see when a property is likely to foreclose, so they can kind of come in and make the offer to buy the property. I think there's financial data that like mortgage professionals can look at and be like, okay, these people probably need to refinance. So again, I'm pretty sure, again, all that data is just out there. They just package it together and pop it through this, just get it there for you to see. So there are 2 that exist, and I've got 2 ideas as well. Have you got ideas? Do you want me to go straight in?
I've got a couple that exist, and I've got ideas as well. So yeah, you carry on. Let's go with you.
Right. Idea 1. Using school governors' reports to create rich sales data for companies that sell into schools. So school budgets are billions, and there's a load of companies that would love to get school contracts, IT, construction, recruitment companies. There's a lot of vendors selling into that space. The problem is it's a nightmare to sell into schools, as we have tried to do in the past, and you can do it, but it's very, very difficult. But on these reports, these governance reports are incredibly rich. They'll have like, yearly or half-yearly meetings or whatever, and it's just like, we discussed the fact that we need to enhance our sports hall, or, we have got some computers that they're running, they're not very good, so we need to kind of improve our IT systems, and we're going to strategize that in the next year. So my suggestion is you literally take that 20,000 schools just in the UK, and you just suck all of that information out of those reports, shove it in a database or an Airtable or whatever, and then you can just toggle by whatever you care about. So if you're a construction company, you can toggle by schools that are looking to do construction projects, type of project, size of school, so you can work out the likely budget. IT companies could look at, schools that need new IT systems, and it will be manual, right? So possibly some kind of chat GPT could suck that information out or get you somewhere. You're going to have people looking at 20,000 of these reports, sucking that information out, putting it in a table, and then you're selling that into all of these vendors that want school contracts.
I mean, you'd use some form of character recognition. You'd be able to train a model to be able to strip out keyword like frequency, and probably
you could get quite a long way down the road, couldn't you, with tech?
I mean, the only thing about it is it's looking to spend, and they may not have a budget yet. I wonder whether those governors' reports are about getting the budget. They're more like a pitch, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of it. So the rich data is, look, this is what we need to do.
Right.
So they don't always have budget, for sure. But ultimately, a lot of it is kind of stuff they literally have to do. Like, this building is falling down. We need to renovate it. Number 2, a database of sales leads for marketing agencies. So, are you smiling because you've got this?
I get pitched it every week.
Yeah, there's vendors that do this, but they're shit.
Yeah, I'm sure.
What you would do is you would go, you would pick a certain size of business, but then, and you would say, like, all these agencies do now, these lead gen agencies, they're like, oh, they've had a new head of business development starting, or this is their turnover, like, shit data, like, not completely shit, but pretty pointless. And you can get that, you can find that stuff out pretty easily yourself. What is really valuable, I think, you look at a certain type of business and then you look at what they're doing from a marketing perspective, and you look at the quality of it, and then you look at the opportunity. So, for example, you're like, let's just take hotels as a market. You're like, okay, cool. So hotels, this hotel's, their SEO is 2 out of 10. It's absolute shit. The opportunity is 8 out of 10. Their paid advertising, they're doing this, it's shit. Their brand is this level. And then as an agency, you can look in and go, okay, cool. Like, we want to sell into these businesses, and, what we do, they're way underperforming on. So we can kind of immediately, when we target our pitch, we can zero in on that opportunity to how we can help them straight away. Because actually, like, hotels, I don't know how many there are, tens of thousands. There'll be a subset of those hotels that, like, SEO is a huge opportunity. They're doing it abysmally, and they're probably going to have budget for it because they're big enough hotels. So there'll be a sort of subset of like 200 or 300 hotels that SEO is an absolute no-brainer for them. And this again, a little bit manual, probably the same kind of vibe as what you suggested, probably more manual than the school one. But you just create all of that rich data, and then you just sell that into marketing agencies.
So it's actually, you're selling insights rather than data there, right? It's insights, which is obviously derived from data, but it's insights.
Yeah, but I suppose, you're doing something with the data. Yeah, you're like turning it into something useful for them.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think if you can go into somewhere and say, hey, we've got a customer segmentation list here for you. These people have triggered this kind of alert or this kind of status. These are the people you should be approaching. This is what you can approach them with. And your job is to map the market, and your job is to process that, and your job is to give those insights. That's an interesting feed, potentially. Could be, really could be. Okay. Right. I'm going to go through one that exists, and then two that exist, and then one that I think is a big one. And I think we could probably talk around a few ideas in it. So obviously ones that exist, and you'll see it if you ever watch Premier League or any sports stuff, is those little lumps that sit on the back of players' backs. And it never, when we were growing up, did we ever get how many yards a person ran, or how many interceptions they did, or how many passes they did. So I think what's happened in sport, even everything from, like, if anybody's seen Moneyball, been completely revolutionised by data. And I think that's a fantastic application, because people can now see something that's physical in data. And I think that's the really cool thing for me. Is that you've got people running around on a football pitch doing things, and then that is represented in a chart, or that is represented in a data table. And I know I come from the engineering side of life, but I think that is exceptionally cool. And it's completely disrupted how people are looked after from a physical health perspective in sport, what their value is, whether they'll even be selected, whether they run out of gas after 60 minutes because they've hit 10,000 yards and that's their limit, and then that's all they can do. So I think sport is a really interesting one. The other one, completely opposite, is I spoke to a really fascinating business from, where was she from? I think she's from BC, she's from Vancouver, up in BC somewhere, near Victoria. Farming. Now, you get a lot of agri-tech businesses coming out, but they work specifically in dairy farming, identifying and tracking mitosis in cows, which is sexy shit, right? This is like scanning the udders, scanning the, where did the udders come from? Where are the udders coming off?
We'll go with udders, yeah.
That bulge with the udders off it, they scan that using infrared, and then they're tracking that. They basically have an algorithm that studies that infrared picture and identifies whether mitosis is present in that cow, and then it basically hauls that cow out, or does something with that cow, and then tracks that cow's mitosis levels from data and everything that gets kind of pulled from that to when that cow is back in health. Because a cow that has got mitosis can't produce milk at the same either volume or at all as a healthy cow. So it's about keeping these cows in rotation. Now, what I couldn't believe about this was that some of these farms have got like 250,000 cows, like in Wyoming or Kansas somewhere. 250,000 cows, and mitosis can affect like 5%, 10%.
250,000 cows.
Yeah, you've got a shitload of your workforce, your little cows, out of business at a certain point in time.
Do you reckon that those farms are like, they look after the cows? Do you reckon it's just horror?
Yes, yeah, apparently they do. Apparently it's pretty good. What they don't do, though, they do not embrace tech. And there's a few of them that this company sells to, and we should put a link in them beneath and I'll dig it out. Because she was really cool. The founder was really cool. Lovely, lovely person. And very passionate about using data and tech inside of the farming space. But I just couldn't believe the scale. And do you know the best bit is? They charge per cow. That's their business model. Their identification and data set that they produce on their cows is charged per cow. I think it's cents on the dollar for a 250,000 cow farm, but really interesting.
It sounds like an absolute no-brainer if it works, doesn't it?
It does work. She showed it. Saw the videos.
And does she sell it in? Is she able to sell it in, or is she kind of getting resistance?
Yeah, no, they've got pilots and everything. So what happens is these cows go round. It's quite funny. If you think about carousel, it should be called a cowcell. It goes round like this, and the cows will go in, and they basically get milked as they go round. And they move. I guess they move them round for, I don't know, probably for experience, or make sure that the cows are settled or something. Maybe that's how they bring them in and bring them out. So they rotate and put them in and put them out. And there's just basically a camera that sits there, and the cow past, and it reads the image of the cow's udder thing, and then it can say, okay, this is a flag, and then they can pull that cow out and go and treat it. So it actually supports the health of the cow, and obviously it's got a commercial impact as well. But then they track how often they get it, where are they actually getting this from, what fields have they been in, what are they eating, what age are they? All of that insight to prevent this cow getting this sickness. And it will be the first of many. This is no way this is the only one that disrupts a cow doing its job. And I just think like farming, agri-tech, all of that kind of really traditional industry, I don't just scratch the surface. Really hard to
scratch. Love it. I've got a mate actually that has a business. It's like a little robot that just like goes across all of the the fields or whatever, and it just works out. Oh, like these, you need to do X, Y, and Z with the crops because X, Y, and Z has happened.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And the old way of doing it was just some bloke strolls out there, like looks at it. It's one of those, isn't it, that it's just, there's a lot of distance to travel with technology.
We met a couple of guys in South Africa, really nice chaps, and they were doing CBD, so looking to basically move on that thing about 2 years ago. But how they tracked the quality of their product was through soil analysis, and then taking that against weather and everything else like that. So they were just doing this, and they showed me the data set, the soil. It was like wild. It was like 45 data points.
Yeah, soil. It's hectic.
And you're just thinking, crikey. Normally, someone would have picked that up and gone, yeah, that's good to go. But I don't know, do they do that in vitology? Do they do it in wine? Do they what other industries haven't been touched within inside of farming alone that you could build a tool for? Maybe all of them are done. I'm not sure. But I know that farming dairy farming, and that sickness, particularly that mitosis thing, they're going to smash it. If I was in a position to invest in a business, it would definitely be them.
Do we want to say the name of the business?
I can't remember it. We'll put it down below. Right. Do you want to hear my
Let's get your ideas.
Yeah. So retail, high street. Okay. So we worked with a company called SML, which actually stands for small, medium, and large. And they do all of the inventory management for some absolute monsters on the high street. We're talking like big stores in the UK and the US. And we worked with them during coming out of COVID to build a frictionless checkout system. And that was essentially like Amazon Fresh, but kind of with a QR code. So you go in, you scan the QR code on the actual garment. It was garment level. It wasn't line level, garment level. So you know that you were dealing with garment 7,642, even though it's just a black T-shirt. And then you would add that to your basket, and then you could check out and you could walk out. And it would all be checked off to the security systems from the cloud. Now, the reason they wanted to do that was to track essentially what is a very, very dark environment for retailers. And no one bought it, actually. I think people associated it with those Tesco checkouts, like this is just an easier way to do it. And people were returning a lot because of COVID, and people didn't want to queue because of COVID. So it was viewed by the retailers as a solution to COVID rather than a solution to actual data. And I think if you look at what we track online in e-commerce, we track where people move, we track how long they stay somewhere, we track what items they're looking at, and we track baskets, what they've got in it, and basket abandonment. None of that happens in a physical retail store. Nothing. It's dark. It's literally dark. If you're thinking about what you've actually got, you've got the whole milk at the back of the shop kind of theory, where you get people to go there and you've got kind of some gamification around trying to get people to purchase certain things. And you will have to trial, certain installations to try and get people to do things and try and control behavior. But Insight, I think, is in its infancy. There very well may be some companies out there that are doing this, but some ideas that you could be looking at. I think there's got to be something around camera technology and tracking behavior. I know there's probably loads of data protection there, but there's got to be something around how we can use camera technology in the way that Amazon Fresh use it, but maybe more for behavior and movement. So could you identify a customer, yellow jacket, that yellow jacket is moving between this, and begin to understand the trends of how people move around the store? I do think having the basket approach to someone picking something up, scanning it, I've looked at that, I'm interested in that. The data you can throw down to that customer. I'm looking at this North Face t-shirt. I want to know where that came from. When did that get made? How long has that been in store? If I buy this, how do I get this? So I've got independent information like we would have online, but in store. So I think there is an opportunity to serve data either down to the consumer with inside of that, so the consumer experience is better. But I think more importantly, shine a light on consumer behavior within inside of a retail space, because I do think it's dark. It's really dark. And many people have tried to do it via Bluetooth pings and all sorts of things about moving around the store. But the challenge is you're never going to get people, unless you've got a reason for that consumer, like a checkout system, an app, to download that to communicate with your in-store hardware. And then you've got also a shitload of hardware, which is going to be expensive. The installations are going to be hard. So I think that space is ripe for disruption. I don't quite know what it is. I think it's probably going to be camera-based. I think as we really evolve what that looks like. But I think understanding where you are, what you're interested in, what you're picking up, what you're putting down, what you're checking out with, is going to be absolutely vital. Imagine trying to run an e-commerce store without any of that data.
Yeah, I think the camera stuff's really interesting. I mean, let's just put all the privacy stuff aside for now. I've got no idea about that, but there would be a million metrics of like how people behave as they walk around the store that would potentially be interesting. So presume they know, don't they, like what stuff sells, but what they definitely don't know is, let's take a metric that I'm just literally making up, which is like dwell time. So it would be quite cool to know like how long someone dwells looking at a set of products and then kind of overlay that with how many are sold. That would be a sick metric. So let's just take a supermarket and you've got like, you put up a display of like nuts or whatever, and you know how many nuts are sold, but actually knowing how long people spent looking at the nuts then versus what was sold would be a pretty nice top line metric of, we're clearly not converting. It would be about then conversion, wouldn't it? And my nut display is a bit shit. And I think that, would that be interesting? That's one. Another one, like you said, is people that pick stuff up and put it back down again. That would be quite a cool metric. Definitely happens in clothes stores, doesn't it? Like people try stuff on, or they pick it up and they look at it and they put it back down. That would be a cool metric.
Now imagine that. Right. Now imagine if all of your size small North Face t-shirts are getting picked up, tried on and not converting. Yet your larges are. There's something wrong with the sizing between your small, medium and large. Inside like that you can see would be huge. But the only way we could see that we could track it, when you've got the individual QR code against that item, you're checking that item and you can track that item then. You can see whether someone's picked it up, digitally holding it, in-store holding it. If they then checked out, they carried on holding it. If they didn't check out with it, they've dropped it. That was how we viewed that challenge. But I don't think you can ask people to do that with this, I don't think you can ask people. Not going to do it. Unless you've got a big hook like, I don't want to queue up there, or it's just easier for me to check out. So I think the insight, it would be such a fascinating exercise to spend 2 weeks with people in retail and people who understand camera technology deeply to go and say, how do we get this output? We need to get this data. How do we go and get that data effectively and efficiently? Because once we've got it, the insights would be wild.
Yeah, agreed. I'd be interested to hear about the sort of the privacy side of things. But I think
dark retail. Let's call it that. Let's call the episode Dark Retail.
I like it. I think there's a lot there. It's not a simple solution, but if you could get it right, you could kind of get the privacy right and the market fit right. I think could be exciting. All right, let's get to the next one.
So the next one is not quite as exciting. So this was.
Rich, you've got to pitch it better than that.
Well, it's about logistics. I mean, is that super?
I boring business is the way forward, surely.
Okay, all right. Well, back in 2000 and whatever it was, 2010. There was a dragon. I don't think she's sadly with us anymore. Hilary Duvet. Do you remember her?
I do. Yeah,
really,
she has some logistics.
Dramatic, quite a character.
Yeah,
she was from Yorkshire. I think. So she made her money by basically simplistically centralising pallets in haulage. That's what she did. So she centralised. I think it was in Peterborough somewhere. haulage firms would come in, they'd drop their shit off, and then another haulage firm would pick it up and take it away. So the haulage firms only did this between the sections, rather than going all the way to Yorkshire, not having enough to take back and coming back with empty trucks. So she made haulage essentially really, really efficient, and she did that through. So this got me thinking. I was like, right, what other logistical industries or industries that rely on logistics aren't doing this? So the retail, sewn up, Amazon absolutely ripped that one apart, no problem at all. I spoke to a guy a while back. His company was called Wex, and he was about private jets and optimizing private jets because they've got spare seats, and that's ultimately what they're looking for. So I think transport in the main, like mass transport, I think has been sorted. My challenge is there is no way this has happened in the rental car market. So have you ever tried to hire a car from one city and return it into the other city without having your eyes absolutely clawed out with the price? And I think they absolutely claw your eyes out because they're charging you for a return journey. So they're saying, right, I'm going to drop. We booked a rather beautifully shit Chevy Malibu that we were going to take from Seattle down to Denver. We were going to go via all of the top route. Beautiful, beautiful drive. The thing ended up having flat tires and no washer fluid that wasn't water, so it froze. We had to give it back. Another sub story. But they wanted to. I had to pay a premium, I think, of 70% to get it picked up from Denver because it's one way. And I was like, this bullshit. This is the same company. This is thrifty. Never go with them, by the way. I'm saying that. Horrendous. We can write thrifty equals shit.
We'll get the lawyers to check this segment out.
Yeah, absolutely.
You get some like these guys
horrible shitty customer service from a horrible company. Anyway, there is a fee, massive fee for the return of the vehicle. I think that's in place because they do not have effective fleet management. I don't think they really know exactly planning, flow of information in from consumers, so we can see the amount of people looking to buy at this certain time in this certain region with this side of journey, that then can be matched up with this type of car being replaced coming back at that particular day. I don't think that piece has been fixed yet. I think what they do is they think, oh, we've got this car coming in at this day, that's what you get. And I think that's why when you rock up, you're dreaming of getting that, Mustang as a Brit. And they're like, yeah, I ain't got a Mustang today. I've got a Fiat 500 though. You can have that.
I want to say that surely these companies have considered this. Having said that, having been to Enterprise Rent a Car last week, I could believe that they haven't. Can I pivot this? I've got something else in the rental car market. I like your idea.
Terrible. Just pour some custard on it. Yeah, that's fine. No problem.
I like your idea. Surely they've worked it out internally, or they've at least thought. I mean, if they haven't thought, it would be the first thing you'd think of, surely. But I agree. They obviously haven't figured it out, but I suspect there's a reason why.
They could just be getting extra money.
Or they could just be gouging, exactly, which is probably what they're doing. So this is about days. This is interesting. So got our rental car, and they gave us a Renault Captur for the week. So a little Renault Captur for a week, and we're driving around, and Lindsay's like, you know what? I actually quite like this. It's less buggy than the car we have in terms of the internal system. It kind of drives quite nice. I wouldn't mind a Renault Captur. And it got me thinking of there must be a play between rental car companies and the manufacturers for collecting data on customers, sentiment about the cars, and then feeding that back into the company. Because let's just say they just asked me the question after my rental, and they're like, did you like your car? And I'm like, you know what? Actually, I did quite like it. And then Enterprise Rent a Car, they've got that incredible rich data that Renault would love. surely there's got to be a way for Enterprise to go to Renault and be like, these guys, they were buzzing about their capture. If you set them an appointment now to go and do a test drive or get a small percentage off or whatever, we'd be hot to trot. I would do that. If Renault contacted me now, Lindsay would be biting the hand off to go and do it. But without that, can we really be bothered to like phone up Renault? So Enterprise Rent-A-Car, don't know how many rentals they do, but a lot of people are trying a car for the first time. Surely their sentiment of if they like that car is... And they didn't even capture it. They don't even know that I liked it. They asked, do I like their customer service? No, it's shit. Yeah. But they didn't ask me about... Oh, no, that's unfair. That is unfair. It wasn't shit. It was actually quite good. The people at Enterprise were good. So I don't want to say they were shit. The thing about it was just how badly they like gouged my eyes out with a spoon. That was the bit that I felt a little bit unpalatable. But the people there were good. So I want to retract that. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity there.
I think that's really interesting. I wonder if could you build a company around that? So think about it. You've got to build a mechanism for the collection of that data, and then you've got to be selling that feedback. So you've got to get Renault to go, Enterprise, you've got to plug in Doug's data thing or whatever.
I feel like the problem with it is that there's only a few buyers and sellers, aren't there? There's only like 20 manufacturers. There's a few big rental car companies. It probably... Yeah,
is this the only thing you rent? Is this possibly the only product that human beings rent? No. So if you could do... I mean, I think it's really interesting. You talk about that because I've rented Nissan Jukes and all sorts of stuff. And every time I get into it, particularly in Mexico, we rent a lot of cars in Mexico. I'm like, oh, this one's nice. Oh, this is nice. Oh, I don't like this. Oh, this is nice. I'm essentially test driving their cars that I could be a purchaser of. I've never thought about it like that.
Similar one is like golf clubs. Like you often go to a course and you, like if I went to Portugal, I rented some clubs to play because I didn't want to, like people get quite keen and they take their own whatever, but I can never be bothered to do that. So I rent clubs. Again, so there's a richness of data there. Like they've not asked me if I liked the clubs. And again, like that would be really good data. So yeah, there must be other ones. I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Presumably like, you can rent industrial equipment like diggers and stuff. I don't know if there'd be something.
I think if you were to look at this, it's any opportunity to get experiential rich data for the manufacturer. That's the trick, isn't it? That's the thing. I think it's interesting, Doug. I've never thought about it, but you're totally right. Everybody has an opinion. Well, don't want to blanket. I definitely have an opinion every single time I hire a car. Every single time. And I will then pass that opinion on to my friends, and I'll say this. And if someone says, "What should I get?" I'll say, "Get this if you can." I think it's. I'm not saying it's a world beater, but it's interesting. Probably more interesting.
There's constraints to it that I don't like. It just in terms of the use cases and the size of the market and that kind of stuff. But definitely some rich data that's being kind of missed out on there. I've got one other thing that just occurred to me that had we been talking about like the excess capacity on cruise ships and like cruise ships moving around? No.
Well, we were talking about excess, and not excess capacity, shortfall. So like that's what we were talking about. But go on.
I can't remember if it was you that I was speaking to this about, but basically this business actually exists, but it's just interesting that so cruise ships essentially they do their little trip where they make all their money and they've kind of got to get the cruise ship back. And they have these sort of return journeys that aren't really advertised. They just need to move the thing back and you can get really, really good cheap deals on those journeys. And I think it's probably similar to these flight clubs where but I think these consumer data plays are really interesting because if you can surface cheap deals, like there's a guy that has a website for like training around Europe, and one of the ways he monetizes.
Oh, like 667 or something. Is that him?
Exactly what it is. Yeah, I can't remember exactly. I wrote a LinkedIn post on it, so I kind of looked into it. But
he came up with this story just when he was on holiday, didn't he? He was riding a train. He just came up with this business and just boomed.
Yeah, he basically said, "There's no good information on how to move around Europe on train. I'm going to create that information, and then he just monetizes it." And one of his things I think is finding deals. But yeah, So I love the value of the B2B play, but I think the B2C data play is probably just a really good one because people will just buzz for cheap shit, don't they? So if you can get them a cruise or a flight or a train ride for cheaper, just going to collect that information would be, is a
well, like Jack's Flight Club,
probably a way better business than like finding out if people like their Renault Capture.
Yeah, I think the difference is what we open this conversation with is what hasn't been touched, and I think that we were trying to get original thought around different areas that people don't necessarily think about. I'm not sure if people think about their review of their hire car, the marketing information, or the manufacturer value that provides. I've never thought about that, and that's what we're about. We're about independent, original thought, Doug. So I think it hits the nail.
Have you got any more ideas?
No, I haven't. I'm literally tapped out. You shat on my logistics idea. I was like, yeah, pallets. It's all going to be about that. No, that was shat up from a great night. No, I'm done. It's good. Really interesting. I quite like your rental car one. I'm not sure how you do it, but I quite like it.
Yeah, it's not the worst, is it? All right, nice one, Rich. See you next time.
Thanks, Doug.